Hey guys, so in this video we are going to talk about simplicity and complexity, so let's get into it. Now, today I was just perusing my daily comments and my daily notices on my channel, and as I do, because I want you to know that I do that absolutely every single day. I start every morning by just looking through the comments and all of that good stuff and so forth. And today there was a very nice comment on one of my videos where I talk a little bit about how complexity is actually the worst trade that you cannot possibly make if the trade is between complexity and something like boilerplate, for example. You should, and this is still true, this is not a video where I go back on my word, just trust me on this one. Complexity versus boilerplate. Boilerplate wins every single day of the week. And the reason why boilerplate wins is because boilerplate is not complex, it's simply boring. But in this video we're going to talk about trying to strive for simplicity and how tricky simplicity actually is. Now, the problem with simplicity is that it is very, very, very subjective. And it's something that, to me, is an ongoing process continuously, because you can start out creating something that seems simple. And usually this happens at not just the tools level, it happens at the API level, it happens at the product level, it happens at all facets of everything. And I think that is the natural progression of things, actually. I think everything starts out that way, even human society, if you think about it. Let's take a small town. Usually a small town starts out as the simple little thing, and as you add more houses and more infrastructure and so forth, the complexity of the town grows, and we call it, well, sooner or later we call it a city. And the same thing goes for most things. I mean, look at our law system, the laws of the world. Same deal there. It used to be that we had 10 commandments or something, I heard. No, not really, but you get the idea. Things usually start out simple, and they grow in complexity over time. And keeping something that is inherently truly complex simple for whoever is going to consume it is one of the most complex things there is. See what I did there? Are you following? Simplicity is complex. And let us just have a look at something that I think very elegantly illustrates my point. Let's talk about jQuery. jQuery, for those of you who haven't really thought about this, jQuery is alone in its field. Just think about this for a moment. If we are talking about SPAs, and we talk about Angular or React or Vue or Aurelia or Backbone or Ember or Knockout or whichever you want to talk about, whoever you want to talk about, they are not alone. They're not alone in their field. They are all rivaling each other in some fashion. Some are more popular than others, absolutely, but they are all rivaling each other for your attention, for you to want to use them as a tool. And this is the same thing for Ajax APIs, such as Axios, for example, or SuperAgent, or NodeFetch, or whatever you want to pick. But not jQuery. The only rival I've ever seen to jQuery that has even been remotely feasible, or I wouldn't even call it a rival. It was more like an experiment, really. Well, that's a strong word, but that's how I feel about it. Is Prototype.js. jQuery is the heavyweight champion of of libraries in JavaScript. It is the most dominating library that we have ever had, and it stands almost unopposed. Why is that? Well, there are a few theories about this, but let me explain what I think the reason is. I believe that the reason why jQuery is so massively popular is because it has done something that is so complicated to get right that nobody else has been able to do it in a better way. Just think about it. Now you may think of jQuery, if you're just starting out, you may not realize this, but back in the day, the inconsistencies in the browser environment was immense. And jQuery not only gave you a suite of tools that allowed you to do almost everything you wanted to do in JavaScript land at the time, but they also took care of the browser incompatibilities, which meant that you didn't have to think about everything. From the perspective of your code, everything just worked. You didn't have to think about whether, for the most part, which browser you were in, not as long as jQuery was involved. And to my knowledge, nobody has ever been able to do that in a nicer way. And that's why jQuery became so immensely popular. And that is the power of simplicity. Because jQuery is a very, very simple concept to understand. It's easy to use. It's a great user experience overall. But the underlying mechanics of the thing are so complicated that you cannot even understand how complicated they are. And that complexity is wrapped in simplicity. That's what I think is so interesting about this comment, which my subscriber posted, where he was saying that simplicity is a great and powerful thing, but it's extremely difficult to get right. And it is true. There were so many opportunities for the jQuery core team to fuck up that entire framework, and they really didn't. They kind of kept the simplicity around. They kept things simple but powerful, and that is a skill sorely sought after by so many, not just tools, but industries. If you look at a lot of the bigger companies out there in the world, they usually go through the same process where they start as a small company, they produce something that is fairly simple and easy to consume. And as they go along, they add more and more complexity and the system grows. Take Facebook, for example. And although they are making more money, their product becomes more stale and heavier, and they can't really move as much, and the complexity just goes up basically in proportion to the business. And that's where startup companies have a chance to actually really get some market share, because they don't have that type of issue. They usually can go, and I actually argue that that's the most secure business strategy you can have as a small company, bringing simplicity to something that is complex. Now that is of course a very broad statement, but I've seen it been successful 100 times over. Because complexity is something that we all hate, and simplicity is something that is fairly universally loved. So, in software development, you imagine that this is something that is a desirable thing to go after, and it absolutely is. The tricky part is to get it right. Because trust me, if you've ever sat down and tried to write a third-party library or an open source project that is going to be used for mass consumption to solve some type of problem for somebody else, only then will you realize how difficult it is to make something truly user-friendly. It is very, very tricky, and it's a great exercise for you if you wanted to try out how complex simplicity actually is to achieve. So what I can tell you is that there is no real rule for how to make something simple. It's something that you kind of have to be inspired by other tools that have done it right in order to achieve yourself. And all I can really tell you, that if you want a great opportunity to learn from probably the best people in the world when it comes to designing a well thought out, simple, extremely well thought out third-party library, I suggest that you have a look at jQuery. It is still today probably even though I don't think it's relevant anymore, it has filled its purpose, but it is still a engineering masterpiece. I really think it is. I have never seen anything even remotely as well planned out and as well structured as jQuery. It is simply amazing. It is the perfect example. It could have been a textbook example of how complex simplicity can be and how simple you can make something complex. Yeah, have a great day.